Hello and welcome from Buenos Aires, Argentina to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where Nate has conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those that have some connection to Latin America. My name is Josefina Dominguez and I am an editor for LatimList, a proud sponsor of the Crossing Borders podcast. Sign up for our weekly updates on latimlist.com to get a summary of the week's biggest headlines in Latin American tech news. Nate's guest today is Ángel Sahagún, CEO and founder of Albo, a personal finance app that allows customers to open a digital bank account in just 5 minutes and is the leading neobank in Mexico. They talk about why Albo is a game changer in Mexico's market, how Ángel became obsessed with fintech from a young age, and they also talk about Yucatan's entrepreneurial ecosystem, which is where Ángel is originally from. We hope you enjoy this conversation with Ángel Sahagún.
Hey, Ángel, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being willing to do it.
No, thank you for the invitation, Nathan.
Where are you in the world today?
Well, right now I'm at Mexico City doing quarantine.
Tell me a little bit about Albo. What's the business do?
Well, Albo is the leading and fastest growing challenger bank in Mexico. What we offer is completely replaced for your bank. So we are offering a debit card, a bank account, plus a mobile app. So you download the app and in under 5 minutes, you get a full-fledged bank account and a debit card, and you can pay whatever you want. You can manage your expenses. You can create a saving account. So you can do a lot of things. So basically, we're providing a better financial solution for everybody in Mexico.
Probably most listeners are familiar with neobanks and challenger banks somewhere in the world, but maybe they don't know the Mexico market well. So talk a little bit about why it's such a big problem to solve in Mexico, and maybe an even bigger opportunity in Mexico than other places in the world.
Well, that's a good question because yes, the opportunity is huge here. Why? Well, first, because less than 50% of the population own a bank account, right? And on the other hand, 90% of the Mexicans owns a smartphone. So you have this huge gap of people with a smartphone, but without a bank account. So in the next few years, we will see a drastic change in that because more people will need payment solutions. And if you have the possibility to get a bank account or get a payment method right from your mobile, will be awesome. And this will impact the financial inclusion in this country. And I also need to add that one of the main reasons that only 0.5% of the Mexicans owns a bank account is that the current bank offering, the solutions from the incumbents are very poor, are very bad, right? You need to go to a branch to open a bank account. You need to pay a lot of fees if you want to maintain an account balance. So that's the reason we started Albo, because we want to change that and we want to improve the financial system in this country.
Yeah, for some context for maybe people who aren't in the region, we have JT on our team who's from China originally and has been living in Latin America for over 2 years. And her first bank account in Latin America was actually in Albo because we couldn't open one for her in Chile, even though we had connections. She couldn't, and she was going to travel in Mexico. So she got her Albo in 2 days and it was all set. So it's a completely different user experience than going to a traditional bank.
Yeah, you only need to have personal ID and a smartphone, and you can open an Albo account for free. So this was a game changer for the Mexican market.
So we're going to talk more about Albo in the market in a little bit here, but I wanted to go into your background. Where are you from originally?
Well, I was born 31 years ago in Campeche. Campeche is a very small town in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, 200,000 people there. And I started in the fintech world since I was 19. So for the past 10 years, I have been completely obsessed with fintech solutions.
I think you're the first entrepreneur on the podcast from Yucatan. What's it like down there for tech? most people maybe know about the travel and tourism, but what's the tech ecosystem and engineering look like?
Well, there's a lot of talented people there. And in the past few years, we have seen a huge increase on the entrepreneurial ecosystem there. I think one of the main problems is the lack of capital, right? Because, well, it's not so advanced, such as Mexico City or Guadalajara or Monterrey in terms of funding. But I really believe that in the next few years, we will see a lot of new startups growing there because I think that for me, the talent is the most important asset for every company. So, and there's a lot of talented people there. I expect to see huge successes there in the next few years.
And you mentioned that you were in fintech since you were 19. Did you always know that you were going to be an entrepreneur? And if so, do you have any interesting stories about growing up that show that you knew you were going to be on that path?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question because, to be honest, when I was a kid, I didn't think about create a company, right? Well, my main focus since I was very young was to create value, right? I have been always obsessed to create value because one of my mantras is I want to build the world where I want to live in, right? A lot of people talk about all the bad things, the government, the health issues, the whatever, right? But nobody does anything. And I'm a doer. I love to create, to build, and to share value, right? So when I grew up, I understood that for me, for my situation and my capabilities, the best way to create more value was to start a company. So that was the reason I started my first company when I was 19. It was a fintech. One of the first fintechs in the region was called Money Mentor and was a personal finance management app. And even when it wasn't a success, I learned a lot of things there, right? I remember one time when I was like 14, I was playing in my soccer team because I love soccer. And my performance in the first half of that match was terrible. And my coach approached me and said, "What happened with you? You are doing awful. Like, don't you want to be a professional soccer player?" And my answer was, "Hell no, obviously not. I want to create more value than that." So now I see that on perspective, and I'm very happy with my place right now. I really believe I'm in the best place to create value for my country, for the society.
So you created Money Mentor, which is the PFM, and then you also created a small kind of real estate and fintech. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I invested on that. It's called Mis Rentas. It's still working and growing. Basically, it's a platform for landlords who wants to manage their properties. So I co-founded this in 2013. And I also founded in 2012 my second company. It was a software development company specialized in financial institutions. So we developed software for the major banks in Mexico. And that's when I learned more about how a bank operates behind the scenes and was very insightful and give me the resources to later on start Albo, right? And compete those big guys.
So talk a little bit about starting Albo. Why did you start this business rather than any other one that you could have started? And what did you learn from your previous startups that helped you choose this one?
Well, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I have been obsessed with fintech. And the reason behind that is because when I was younger, I have a lot of problems with financial institutions, right? I remember when I was at the university, 20 years old, I studied in a private school in Mérida, Yucatan, and my family went bankruptcy and it was a very hard time for us, right? So I started working in order to pay for my tuition, and I started with a lot of problems managing my finances, right? It was very tough for me. So at that time, I remember saying like, well, it's not possible that, that I am in this situation, right? I need to learn more how to manage my finances. And I need to get better financial products in order to have a better financial life. And I couldn't find anything, not any app, and not a good bank that helps me on that. So years later, when I was working with these big banks developing software for them in Mexico, I remember those times and I said, well, now is the time. Now I have the resources. Now I have the technology. I really want to create value. I really want to improve the financial life of everyone in Mexico. I saw the opportunity, and that's the reason I started Albo, because I don't want to have more financial problems in the future. I don't want that anyone in this country have financial problems. So this is the best way to create value for the society for me right now.
Talked a little bit about some of the challenges that Mexicans have getting bank accounts, where only about half of the people have it, but most people have smartphones, and that it's difficult to get an account. Talk a little bit more about the day-to-day realities of the target clients that you went after, because it's a little, the Albo kind of branding and type of clients is a little different than maybe a lot of the neobanks that started going after just having a cool app for very wealthy people.
Yeah, when half of the population in your country doesn't have a bank account, it's because there's a huge problem behind, right? And there are two main drivers. First is the lack of trust in the financial banking system. And the second one is because it's very expensive to have a bank account in Mexico, because you need to pay a lot of fees. Typically, you need to pay between $3 or $4 per month if you want to own a debit account, right? So when we launched Albo, we decided to focus in the underbanked population. This is almost 40% of the population in Mexico. People with a bank account, but with limited access to other financial products, right? For example, to give you perspective, only 15% of the Mexicans have access to a lending product or have access to credit. So yeah, we really believe that if you are in the top 10% of the Mexican population, well, maybe you are not very happy with your bank, but it's good enough, right? But what happened with the other 90%, right? So we believe that if we focus in this underserved subsegment, we can move the needle the most. We can make more impact than only a cool app for rich people, right? So, and also I think that in the long term, the benefits will be bigger, because if we can show this type of customers that it's a better way to manage their money, they will love us and they will stay for us forever, right? So that's why we are focused on this challenging subsegment.
When you started Albo, there weren't many challenger banks in Mexico, and you've been able to build a nice lead to be the leading neobank in Mexico. But over the last few years, there's been seemingly every couple of months a brand new entrant with huge venture capital behind it. Starting with at least 5 million and more. Talk a little bit about the market in Mexico and how you see it shaking out over the next couple of years.
Yes, when we launched Albo in October of 2016, we were the first challenger bank in this country, right? So we started with this first mover advantage. Now you have different competitors in the country. Some of them have more funds than the other ones, but at least until now, we are the most funded and the largest challenger bank in the country by far, right? So what we think will happen is that there will be consolidation in the next few years. I don't think this is a winner takes all type of market, to be honest. Obviously, not everybody can win. So what we think will happen is that in this consolidation, 2 or 3 big companies will emerge as the winners, serving different subsegments with different products. And for me, this is awesome for the country, for the customers, because they will have the opportunity to choose between many other options, right? So, well, let's see. I'm very optimistic that with our current lead and our current product offering, we are in the best place to lead this race.
And when you think about what your average client needs on a day-to-day basis from you or from the financial system, what are some of their daily challenges that they use you for? They have an Albo, they have a bank account now. What does their day-to-day look like now that they do have a bank account compared to before?
Well, they are using Albo for their everyday spending. Our product is very transactional. Our transactional volume it's very high if you compare to other debit accounts, right? And most of them owned a bank account before Albo, but they were not happy with their previous bank account, right? Because they didn't have access to mobile banking, or they were paying huge fees in order to use it. So now they are engaged and they are happy with their solution because it's completely free, because it has a lot of features. It's very secure, and it's very easy the experience is very seamless and very easy to get it. So for the market that we are serving, definitely we have this huge challenge to not only offer a debit product, but also offer new financial products, right? Because they are asking us to do it. So now we are moving to this new journey to be a multi-product company, right? Not only with the debit card, but offering also more financial products in order to really complement the financial life of these guys.
One of the things that the challenger banks have needed is to be successful at fundraising, and you've had a successful fundraising journey. Talk a little bit about how you approached fundraising and the process to actually get your rounds closed.
Well, yeah, we have been very lucky on that, and we have raised more than $26 million from top investors. And for me, it's very clear that in order to raise a good amount of money, you need to show first, you need to show that you can create and deliver value to a lot of people, right? And our KPIs or metrics are very clear on that. We have shown that we can acquire and retain our customers. We have shown that we really understand the local market, and that's a huge advantage right now. Second, you need to have a very strong team. Since the beginning, I was very aware that if you want to build the biggest bank in Mexico, you need to have the best team. So I spent a lot of time recruiting and management, so to build a strong culture and a strong team around that, right? That's super, super important, specifically on early stages, right? And the last one, well, you need to show that you are capable also to scale the business, to create value for a lot of people and with a good speed, right? So that's the reason we have been successful raising money, even with this current situation with the pandemic, that all obviously will be harder than ever to raise more money. I'm very optimistic and I'm very confident because we have seen that our business, it's growing despite the situation, right? In the past few weeks, we have opened more accounts than ever. Our revenue is growing, our assets under management are growing. I'm very optimistic that if we keep hitting the milestones, more money will be available for us.
You've been able to raise from LATAM VCs and also global VCs. What advice would you give LATAM entrepreneurs when raising globally? And then also, what advice would you give to global VCs when thinking about investing in Mexico or LATAM in general?
Well, first I want to mention that for me, the local VCs were super important, mostly at the beginning. And why is that? Because if you have a local VC, they have a very good understanding of the local market. And that's very, very important in the early stages, right? But obviously, when you want to raise more money and Series A, Series B rounds, you need to go outside. You need to go to Europe, to China, to US in order to raise a good amount of money. So for that, it's very important to first show these foreign investors the huge opportunity in the region, in Latin America, because most of them are not aware of the amazing opportunity in this region. So you need to show them numbers, trends that allow them to really get the opportunity, right? That's critical. And second, well, you need to have amazing KPIs and amazing metrics, world-class metrics, in order to compare your business to other similar business in other geographies, right? So if you are capable to show that there's a huge opportunity and that you have the right metrics, maybe even better than other players, other similar players in other countries, I think you are in a good place, right? And regarding the investors, well, my comment is obvious, but you need to start paying more attention to Latin America. For me, it's clear that this will be one of the biggest VC opportunity for VCs in the coming years, because you have a technologically sophisticated, huge population without the right tools and the right services in many industries. So Latin America will be huge, will be huge in the next few years.
Do you have any books, blogs, podcasts, or documentaries that you like to recommend to people, whether about startups or just life in general?
Okay. Well, I can recommend one of my favorite blogs. It's called Wait, But Why? It's an amazing blog that talks about life, technology, businesses in general. It's very, very cool. In terms of books, well, I read a lot of different stuff. One of my main topics is genetics. So I really love that. I can recommend there an amazing book called The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins that talks about genetics in general, but specifically on an anthropological level. It's very cool, and it's very good to understand why the humans were created this way, right? Why we work like we work. And in terms of business, well, for me, high output management, it's like one of my favorite books. And this book has helped me a lot in terms of how to handle our team, how to manage a meeting, how to have one-on-ones, feedback sessions. It's an amazing book for everybody who wants to improve on management, right? So yeah, maybe this will be my 3 recommendations.
If you could go back to when you started your first fintech business all the way back when you were 19, knowing everything that you know today, what advice would you give yourself?
Just do it. And don't hesitate, just do it. It will be hard, it will be challenging, but it's the best way to create a life you want to for you and for the society you live in.
What's next for Albo over the next couple of years?
Well, we need to keep growing, and we need to show that we can create but also capture value. What it means is that we need to show that we are capable to monetize our customer base and that we can create more financial products for our customers. Our mission or our vision is clear. We want to be the biggest consumer bank in Mexico in 2026, right? So we have a lot of work to do in order to succeed.
It's going to be fun to continue to watch and support you as you go forward. And I'm looking forward to seeing you get to your goals.
Well, thank you, Nate. And you have been very supportive in these past few years. And yeah, I'm very optimistic and it will be very fun.
That's a great way to end it. It's going to be fun. Thanks for taking the time to do it. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks to you, Nathan.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with our guest, Ángel Sahagún. And thank you to Ángel Andraca for producing this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend and give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's the best way to share what's going on in Latin America's ecosystem.